Welcome everyone to the Profitable Steward podcast. This is a podcast where we reached out to Doug Ferguson. We're going to talk about current market conditions, livestock marketing, where we're at, where we possibly could go. And so, Doug, thanks for being here with us.
You bet. Thanks for reaching out, Jared.
Yeah, you bet. So, kind of what prompted this for me was reading articles and seeing posts on social media. There's a lot of optimism in the market right now, but there's also some skepticism and I think some genuine fear about where we're at within specifically the cattle market. So I want to just open that up as a discussion point to start off with. Um, how do you respond to folks that have been through your schools when they might call with either in a panic situation or maybe they're overly optimistic and wanting to go spend a bunch of money, make some virgin buys and things? Just give us your thoughts and feelings about where we're at in the market right now, Doug.
Sure. So you mentioned for people that have been to my schools, and so I will always stress those relationships. And one word that can really describe the market right now is wild. There are some very forgiving price relationships out there. I just finished up a trade this week where I had a cost of gain over $2. I've been hearing the same thing from some other people that have been in my school, high cost of gain, but they're still finding the trades, and that's on the stalker side. I do have, probably similar to you, a lot of conversations with people that haven't been to a school yet. And, there's the two camps. I love that old Gordon Hazard quote, you can't throw a stone so high that it won't come back down. And back in, I'd say maybe February, March, I would have told you there's a lot more under this market than above it. I'm glad I never said that publicly because it made a liar out of me. This market's gone up quite a bit. But a lot of people, Jared, they remember those years of 2008 and 15. And when they turned south in a big hurry. I think we took 40 or 50% out of the market just that fall. And that does have some people concerned. Some people are feeling pretty cocky. This market keeps going up. It bails us out of our stupid decisions. So why not just go buy more of
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So what would you say to that when somebody is maybe they've got grass, they've got money. Should they spend it? Should they go buy some cattle?
them? If you don't understand sell by marketing in order to generate positive cash flow, I wouldn't be quite so optimistic. Um, this is one of those deals you have to be in it to be in it for the long haul. And I feel like we are kind of in one of those situations. If you're the speculator, like if you're buying cattle, kind of trying to do the day trader type mentality, like I said, when this market turns, it can turn pretty fast. And like you mentioned, having grass, here in southeast Nebraska, parts of Kansas, we're very fortunate to get some rains to get things started. But our grass is looking very thirsty right now. There's a lot of chatter around the countryside about starting to sell off some cows and some pairs. And if those cows come to town, they're not going back to the country.
Mhm. Yeah. And how much is that affecting the market right now? With it seems like a pretty widespread drought. I don't know, we're insulated from it here where we're at in Nevada, but you don't have to drive very far to see some pretty dry conditions and some minor and some major destocking happening of on the female side. So how is that playing into the current market?
There's a lot of cows sold on the markets. this week I was visiting with some of the local sale barns when I was there, and it's not uncommon to be selling 200 slaughter cows a week, where normally, we'd be maybe catching 50 this time of year.
Okay.
And, Jared, this market's so forgiving, dollar, what I saw some weight cows this week fetch $1.78 here.
Yeah. And
I mean,
you're probably big cows too in Nebraska,
these were
right?
big, yeah, these were your big fat 1600 plus, cows. But uh, it's almost one of those deals. She's worth so much money. Guys really aren't even upset that she's open, or, like these late calvers, these cows that, like, to put this in reference, being in southeast Nebraska, if she does not calve before the corn planter rolls, she's late. And some of these guys are not upset to have a cow in the third trimester. She's worth over $3,000.
Just as a way up
So
cow.
well, they sell her as a bred in the third,
Oh,
but
okay.
I can sell my late calving cow, get $3,000. Like, they're happy with it. They're
Sure.
not
Yeah.
upset she's late.
Yeah. So if there are so many cows going to town, how come this butcher cow market is so strong?
I have no idea. I really can't answer that.
Yeah.
And there's even some of these bred cows. I'm seeing some of the second trimester and first trimester cows, packer buyers buying them.
Really? And
Yeah,
going
yep, they're
absolutely
going
going to
kill.
slaughter and interesting. Yeah. So there's obviously some demand then for the ground. Is and we'll kind of come back to the sell by marketing principles here, but I want to talk about the market in general, more from like what you're going to hear at a coffee shop or online first, and then we'll bring into the sell by marketing piece to that. But
Oh,
so
so
how much are the tariffs? How much is the closing the southern border and all these other external factors affecting where we're at right now?
that's a great question. I wrote about tariffs, I think, a week or two ago. And the reason I wrote about it is I listened to podcasts that are focused on other industries, and then I look for parallels to apply to my cattle operation. And they're all freaking out about tariffs. And I'm like, well, we've already been through this with the cattle. And a lot of your producers have what I'm kind of calling tariff fatigue. Like, we don't even want to hear about it anymore. Um, the southern border thing, that announcement was Sunday night this week. I thought that would light a fire under this market. And honestly, Jared, because of the sell by marketing, I don't pay attention to the board. I have been watching the board every day for the last maybe 6, 8 weeks, just because I like to see if we're seeing green numbers or red numbers. That tells me how everybody's feeling. When I looked at it this morning, it was what, down 6 or something on feeder cattle. I thought closing the southern border would light a fire under that, but it had the opposite effect. So that one's kind of lost on me right now.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's just kind of some of these things we can't quite explain. Okay. So we've got drought, we've got southern border closed, we've got tariffs. Cow numbers are down. That's the other big thing that people are talking about, right? Is that
Hmm.
we're at an all-time low. Is that real? I mean, it's real, but it's just one number. How does that play into the other things that factor into that, including increased carcass weights and beef consumption? Um, cow numbers, is that what's driving this market?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. When you get enough people, how do I want to say this? Say buying the same storyline. So like the cow numbers being down, it tends to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So cow numbers are down, the supply and demand thing factors in. Okay, well, cow numbers are down, the supply's down. that means the market has to go up. Um, I feel like the cow number estimation would have to be relatively accurate because in 2020 they did that CFAT program, which I called it the cow census. You got so many cows, we're going to give you so much COVID money.
Hmm.
So I feel like, there would be a little bit of accuracy to it. And then we know how many have been killed. What we don't know is how many heifers have been retained and
Hmm.
a bull turned out. Just because people kept heifers, they could be running them as yearlings. We won't know for sure until the bulls turned out, which we won't know that number until fall when those heifers would come back as yearlings. Um, but there's been a lot of speculation in that heifer market. A lot of these truck drivers. So you cannot go to a female sale without seeing a dispersal. There's usually two or three on every monthly special. These truck drivers, they're not dumb. They see what these cows are selling for. They're hearing the news about cow numbers being down. Bull haulers were the first guys to start buying open heifers, and they bought them back last fall. So they've done some speculating. They got their heifers bought a lot cheaper than they'd cost today, and that's exactly what they plan on doing: is turning a bull out and then reselling them later this fall as bred heifers. Those bull haulers, since they hauled the cows to town, they knew where the available acres were too. I mean, they were ahead of all of us.
Huh. Huh. Yeah. Yeah. So they're betting on being able to sell that bred heifer for a premium this fall. For Is that
Yeah,
what you're
some
saying?
of them might be smart to just sell her as an open feeder, take their profit now and get
Right.
out. But
Right.
but they've got options. Those guys have a lot of options right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Well, I appreciate you kind of giving us an overview of any other factors that you see that are affecting when you say wild market, um, that either within the industry or outside the industry that are having variables that are affecting the market today, Doug.
I think greed right now is the biggest one. Every sale I go to, I'm going to hear that somebody's going to say this out loud. Just buy them. The market just keeps going up, up, up. I bought some bred cows between Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day. I I could resell those cows that haven't calved yet for 25% more than I bought them for today. So some of these guys have that just buy them mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like in this market, fear and greed are things that absolutely drive it. So, talking about that, what's the intrinsic value of the cow right now? Like,
It's high. It's really high. So I calculated some. If you have that high yielding cow in the third period, she's over $3,700 in Nebraska. If she is a pair with like that 200-pound calf at her side, she's over $4,100.
okay. Hmm. Yeah. So,
So these cows are selling, a lot of them, especially the breds, are selling below their intrinsic value right now.
yeah. And so explain to us, if somebody's new here listening to the podcast, what that means, the intrinsic value.
The short version of it is that is what she is worth to you. And so that's going to be the kill value of the cow plus the value of her calf when you wean it. So we don't know exactly what that's going to be in the future. So we use today's price. So using that high yielding cow at $1.75, you got 5 weight steers bringing, almost $2,300 in Nebraska, 5 weight heifers just under 2 grand. So you average the price of the steer and the heifer calf, and then for those numbers I just gave you, I used a $75 a month cost to keep.
Okay. Hmm.
And so then you subtract that cost to keep value from the value of the cow added to the value of the calf.
Yeah. $75 per month times the number of months that you need to get that calf to weaning, and you can send the cow to town and
Right.
collect on your You're not including a breeding fee because you're just looking at it as she's going to go to Hamburger, right?
Yep, we're assuming the terminus of the cow.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Would you ever figure a bred cow price on an intrinsic value basis? In other words, saying what bred cows are today, throwing a bull with her and adding some extra value, or do you want to always look at what it's going to be in the meat or,
That's
or on
so
the market?
right there, you just mentioned, yeah, there's her intrinsic value, and then there's her actual value, and they are not usually the same. And so you have to learn how to compare the two values. Usually, that actual value is higher than the intrinsic value. So that's what a lot of times, I refer to as the blue sky premium. She's worth more when you sell her in town than she's worth to you. Right now on these bred cows, that really isn't the case. That even though these cows are high priced, just because of the high slaughter value of the cow, the intrinsic value is a lot higher.
Mhm.
And with these slaughter values changing as much as they are, as quickly as they are, I've been telling some of the people who've been through my school, like, you kind of got to calculate these intrinsic values a little bit more regular. I used to say if you did it 2 or 3 times a year, that'd be good enough. And, man, now you probably ought to do it maybe once a month,
Okay.
or at least bell curve some of the sales. I break the bell curves out by age. And the interesting thing is these broken mouth cows are outselling 5-year-old cows.
Explain that one.
I think the theory behind that is a lot of these guys got burned buying $3,500 bred heifers in 2015 just to have a bred heifer, 8 months later be worth 1750.
Mhm.
So we're going to buy the old cow. That way, if this thing goes south, we just split the pair, kill the cow.
Okay.
And it's pushing that old idea of buying the young female and giving her, 10 years to pay for herself theory. It's pushing that into the trash can.
hmm hmm But in reality, is there a difference? I mean, why not buy the young cow for the same dollars and have another option with her versus just going to Hamburger at the end of the.
Hey, it's not my job to question what they want to do. I got broken mouth cows. It's my job to sell them the broken mouth cows and buy these younger cows. In fact, a lot of these
Absolutely.
cows that I bought are in that 5 to 7 year old range. People at the sales I was at, there were people that wanted the 3 and 4 year old cows, and there were people that wanted the older cows. Nobody was buying those 5 to 7 year old cows. So they should go on my buyer number.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes
That's
that makes
buy,
sense.
buy what buy what nobody else wants to buy and sell them what they all want to buy.
Yep. Yep.
I
Um,
mean, we can really make it that simple, Jared.
don't overcomplicate it. Yeah. No, that's
But
that's
that, but I do kind of want to mention this. I've been drawing bell curves and taking pictures of them and throwing them up on the Mr. Cattle Master Facebook page. And when some of these people see these broken mouth pairs or broken mouth breds outselling the 5-year-olds, they are getting very upset.
mhm.
And they're like, well, how does that logically make any sense? There's no point in being upset about it as long as you're not the guy writing the check for those older cows. But we have this paradigm that the younger female should be valued higher, and then these cows depreciate. The market is absolutely thumbing its nose at that theory right now. And so what's happening is people's paradigms are colliding with the reality that's happening, and it upsets them.
Mhm. Yeah. So what's your response to that when they do get upset, but it's the market, it's the reality.
It just is what it is. And, I'll come back to what I said earlier. If you got broken mouth cows, by gosh, get them in front of those guys that want to buy them and buy that 5-year-old and cash your check. I mean, that is a very good trade. Um,
hmm
I calculated one of those trades this yesterday on a sale I saw Wednesday, and I got my notes right here. But if you sold the broken mouth in the third period and you bought a 5-year-old in the second period, so I'm switching gestation periods here, but you could have sold $140 value into the market, got paid $375 for it. So what you did is you got paid to take care to really get rid of this old broken mouth cow and replace her with that younger cow that is in her prime. You know, that 5-year-old cow, she's milking heavy, she weans the biggest calf. Like the market will pay you to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty
I'm
cool.
not I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. How quick are you seeing these market conditions change? Is it accelerated, and how much? Well, let's answer that first and then we'll.
Oh, it's uh let's take Joplin, Missouri, for example. And when you look at that weighted average after the close of that sale, it's up 5 to 20 almost every week. It was had a slight undertone to steady this week, but when you look at what take, some of these flyweight calves, it wasn't too long ago. I thought 450 for a 3-weight steer was overvalued. And today in Kentucky, they sold 3-weight steers for $6.
I saw that. Yeah.
And there is a heck of a value of gain. I mean, the value of gain is really good on those flyweights.
Hmm.
I guess to answer your question, go from March to May, it accelerated very fast.
Hmm. Yeah. And how much variation between geographic locations are you seeing right now?
So like on a 5-weight, there could be a $50 difference between Nebraska and Tennessee.
Okay.
So you can pay that truck driver to haul a load halfway across the continent and still save yourself about 20 grand.
On a load.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So bottom line, I guess, to kind of sum up this, there are always opportunities. Like people say, well, it's too high, what do you say to that? I mean, would you ever recommend that somebody sit it out? Maybe you answered that, right? If you don't understand sell by marketing, if you're looking at buying something, hoping to put weight on and getting paid for that value that you're adding in weight, maybe this isn't the time to jump into the market.
If you're going to do the one and done type deal, I'd be very cautious about that. If you're going to get in it to be in it for the long haul, I wouldn't be the least bit afraid. The relationships are always there. I've done sell by marketing for 21 years, and I've never been in a situation where I couldn't find a buyback. Some of them get a little lean. You might only make 25 bucks a head, but I've always been able to find the buyback, generate that cash flow. Another part to answer your question, it may depend on where you live. I was looking at some market reports out of Mississippi last week, and bred cows down there are selling for less dollars per head than, say, a 7-weight heifer. But their pair market is still very strong. So if you were going to virgin buy some cattle, I would recommend buying those bred cows because when she has that calf, she will increase in value, excuse me, a lot more and a lot quicker than what the value of gain will pay you to put weight on a stocker animal down there right now. And in other parts of the country, that's a little different. You get up into the plain states, this stalker market's really good. And, fat cattle are not, what were they, 229 this week in Nebraska. I mean, I didn't think we'd hit 230. And I mean, we're not technically at 230, but we're very close. A lot of these feed yards are feeling pretty good and they're plowing into these heavy feeders pretty hard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, what would you say as far as utilizing debt to grow right now? Is that a good idea? Somebody somebody that I respect a lot that's been in the industry for a long time, both cattle and sheep. He told me the other day, he said, when the banker wants to give you money, run. When the banker's leery, that's your opportunity. So I don't know. He's been around and full 2 or 3 decades longer than I have, a lot more experience. And I've been pondering on that and just wonder what your thoughts are as far as debt,
So
leverage, and growth.
I don't have a problem with debt. I use debt as long as the return that I'm making is greater than the interest payment that I'm paying. I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
When those interest rates go up and they start taking a bigger piece of the pie, listen, I'm taking all the risk. I'm doing all the work. We have 20 below zero days in Nebraska, and then we have 100-degree days in the summer. I'm the guy fighting the elements. I deserve the bigger piece of the pie. So, yeah, I don't have a problem using debt as long as you got good cash flow and the return is greater than the interest payment. But I'm going to echo exactly what you just said. I'm going to go back 2014. My daughter was doing gymnastics, and one of the bankers in town, his daughter was doing gymnastics, and he passed me in the hallway. And he says, "Hey, this cattle market's really good. Throw some numbers together. We had a pasture come into our trust department. We need to get it rented." And I thought of you. And immediately I told him no,
Hmm.
for the exact reason that you just said. When the banker starts getting excited, that's when I start getting nervous. And when you look at, like, these cows that I mentioned have gone up 25% in value since I bought them this in the dead of this winter. Banker's looking at that balance sheet and he's like, "Hey, you're in really good shape. You want to increase that line of credit?" No, I do not. I mean, I totally agree with what you said. When the banker gets excited, that's when I'm going to start getting a little cautious.
Okay. Yeah. What is the appropriate amount on an ongoing basis of debt versus your own equity in a sell by enterprise?
You know, there are people out there that will talk about ratios, and I don't really subscribe to that. I kind of go a little bit more to the emotional side. If you are losing sleep at night because of the debt, you have borrowed too much. So that's kind of my gauge. Don't lose sleep over it.
Okay. Yeah. And what helps you so that you, even if you have debt, I know there's two camps on that, right? There's those that other people's money, that's the way to go. There's those that I'm going to be 100% self-financed. Oh man, nothing but to love them. Um, so in other words, I bring that up because $1 of debt to one person may cause them to lose sleep. Whereas the other one could be 100% leveraged, even upside down, and they're just happy go lucky, probably somewhat oblivious to what the facts of the reality really are, that they're headed towards a cliff. They don't know it, but they're driving full speed. Um, so I guess.
You went the furthest end of each spectrum as you could on that one. If you're that guy that's driving full speed to into the cliff and don't care, I mean, we call them politicians. Those are the guys, go to Congress. Um, I'm being a little facetious there, but some people, and I was that way too, Jared. When I started out, I was going to be 100% self-financed because I have been broke. I know what that feels like. Was never going to feel that way again. And so when I started, everything was cash. Is I started doing some of these sell by trades over the years. I gained a lot more confidence, more knowledge, more skills. Then I became comfortable with debt. But even still today, I don't use a whole lot. If you're going to do a land, if you're going to purchase some land, I mean, you almost have to. You have to borrow money to buy a ranch or buy a farm or something like that. I do not like borrowing money for machinery.
Okay.
And I do not have a problem borrowing money for cattle, but there again, I know how to market cattle, extremely comfortable with it. I can generate the cash flow there. Um, and the big thing, and this is kind of something I've learned the last several years doing marketing schools, is somebody will come in and they'll give me their situation. I got a land payment. the machinery payment, I got money borrowed on the cattle, and I got an operating note. And I tell them, you got to knock that operating note out first. Like, I want you to pay your operating expenses on a cash only basis because the interest rates on those operating notes, they fluctuate so much. And, sometimes, especially in the conditions that we're in right now, I laugh at the term fixed cost because it seems like none of these costs are fixed. You get your insurance bill in January and it's a certain dollar amount, then you have to pay that insurance bill again 6 months later in June, and it's 20% higher.
Yeah.
It never
Right.
used to be that way.
Yeah.
And if you're paying that out of operating note, those increase in some of those fixed costs like that, plus the interest rate, that's what's hurting people.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. So that's really good. I appreciate you going there. What I was trying to ask is just what you answered, that your level of confidence, increasing your level of confidence helps you to sleep at night. Therefore, you're willing to take on some additional risk, take on some additional debt because you know that, hey, this has worked in the past. I have the skills. That helps you manage those emotions and the worry, and whereas other people might eat them up, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I know some of the people listening to this that have been through ranching for profit. This is what's going through their head right now. Nothing runs without me. I do not own a business. I own a job. I mean, that's what I basically just described. And yes, I will own that. You know, the marketing and stuff does not happen here without me.
Mhm. But that's one of the highest paid positions in any business is marketing. And
Yeah,
so, if you can hire out some of the other things, then and that's your genius and your expertise, man, lean into it. Because who can you hire that can do what you do, Doug?
I can't think of anybody really,
Right.
Jared, but I got into this business for the same reason a lot of other people do. I love riding fences. I love being out there with the cattle. And really the main reason I got so good at the marketing is I have to make money with the cattle. That way I can own more of them.
Yeah.
That was the motivation behind all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And but you put the profit first. It wasn't that the lifestyle had to be subsidized just so that you could go play cowboy. Like,
Exactly.
I think that's the difference, right? That's
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, it's been decades since I've been a broke kid, but when you can go make money and do it consistently and confidently and just have this mindset that I have that I know I'm not going to lose. I don't always know how I'm going to win, but I just know I'm not going to lose. It's so much more fun. Um, I'm going to take you off on a little rabbit trail, but I was asked to speak at career day at my daughter's middle school. And, I wanted to talk about entrepreneurship. And I asked these kids, I'm like, why do you want to make money? And every group that I talked to that day, they all talked about needs. Oh, you got to pay the water bill, the light bill, make the house payment. They were talking about needs.
Mhm.
And this one girl, Jared, and I got to set this up for you. She had green hair and she was dressed goth. And I asked the group she was in that same question, why do you want to make money? And she says, to build the life that I want. And I thought about it for a second. And I'm like, she worded it much better than I did.
Yeah.
So I was a little jealous now. The 13-year-old girl speaks better than I do, but it also made sense. The other kids were telling me the paradigm they got from their parents. This girl with the green hair and the goth clothes, she's the rebel. Of course, she would have a different answer. And she's the one that got it.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. Yep. Boy, good point. I appreciate you bringing that up because so often we only focus on, hey, what do I need? I need to make this mortgage payment. I need to make my house payment, truck payment. We've got all these overhead expenses, and if that's where our focus is, that's one of the things that I think keeps us in debt is because we are not focused on the other side of that, the good that we can do in the world if we're utilizing our gifts and talents and expressing our genius. And so, in your instance, I mean, I don't imagine, I don't know, I don't never asked this, but I don't imagine when you started sell by marketing, you ever thought you were going to be teaching classes, or did you?
Never on my radar. I kind of got pushed into it.
Right. Yeah.
In
And
fact, when I was getting pushed into it, I refused for probably a good year and a half. Like I wouldn't even entertain the thought.
okay. So what shifted there for you to where you agreed to the first one and then now you're, I mean, you're well known as a sell by marketing prac practitioner, but also teacher.
So when I was approached about doing a marketing school, it was the complete package, the resource management, you know, the stalker trades, the cow trades, and I love stalkers. And so I didn't want to do any of the other stuff. So then I was approached with the idea of, oh, well, let's do a stalker special. And I lit up on that idea. I built the entire curriculum for the stalker specials. You know, that class was supposed to be co-taught. I taught like 90% of it, and I really enjoyed it. So we were supposed to teach several schools together, but the other guy backed out on his end of the deal. And I don't know why, but my wife kind of convinced me it'd be a good idea to keep doing these. And so we did them. And this is really the motivation behind why I keep doing this. But there were several guys that heard me on a podcast. They got curious about the marketing. They came to the school, went home. A couple years later, they basically told us that they were suicidal when they came to the school. And then when you listen to the mindset portion that I begin with, and then I go into the trades, it made those guys realize they needed help. And my wife, being a mental health therapist, deals with suicide on, probably a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
And after those testimonials came in, she's like, "You're never getting out of this."
Huh. Huh.
So
I didn't know
that's
that.
yeah,
Uh,
I really don't disclose that, but I feel like there's been enough time has gone by that nobody can look back at anybody and say, "Oh yeah, that was the guy in my class."
yeah.
There's been over 1,200 people been through the schools. You're not going to guess who it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and thanks for being willing to go there because that's one of my concerns, Doug, is that we've been taking all of this money, leveraging ourselves. Our cost of gain is really high. Our expenses are really high. And if the rug gets pulled out from underneath us, what are people going to do? There's opportunity, but doggone it, when you shut down and you freeze up and all you can see is debt and foreclosure notices and the shame, and you imagine all the things that your family's thinking about you, which may or may not be true. Like, man, this guy got us into this situation and he or she, you know, led us down this path and you're taking all that on. That's a tough weight to carry. So, in maybe we can go there for just a minute. In agriculture, it is said, and I haven't been able to substantiate it, but that it's the highest suicide rate of any industry. Have you heard that?
Yeah. I can't remember Mary Jo Ehrman, Farming Without the Bank. She did a podcast recently. She had all those statistics, even I think broke out by age group.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm married to a mental health therapist.
Yeah, you
she
see it.
tells me what the statistics are, and we live in Gage County, Nebraska, which has the highest suicide rate in all of the state of Nebraska. But Mary Jo kind of had that broke out, and it shocked me. And I was shocked it was that high.
Yeah.
And you kind of touched on this a moment ago when you were talking about all the payments, and market directions and this and that, man. When you're an entrepreneur, you're in the crap every day, all day.
Uh-huh.
And, it's just always with us.
Yeah. So from your perspective, what helps when you don't see options, when you don't see solutions, and you're starting to think that, hey, you're the problem, and the world would be better off, your family would be better off if you were out of the equation?
You know, I'm about to say something really awful here, Jared. But, when I was a teenager, there were some kids that I was very close to committed suicide, and it caused me to form a very bitter opinion because I was pissed at them. And so I thought, well, suicide's the sincerest form of self-criticism. I said that when I had a teenage brain. Now I have a 40-year-old brain. I see things differently. And there's a lot of truth in what you just said. We are our biggest problem. That also means we're the solution. The law of polarity,
Yeah.
there has to be an opposite. And all you have to do is work on yourself. And man, I get it. It's hard. I used to be an alcoholic and I quit drinking. I mean, breaking some of these habits are extremely, extremely difficult.
Hmm.
But the flip side of it is, like I can say this from sobriety, it is so much better. And, like you've been to my school and I have those slides where I talk about vibration. I put
Yeah.
depression is the lowest vibration because that's where suicide happens. You do not go from that number one low vibration to the number 10, which is, joy. You have to go through each one up, so like it's going to be from depression to sadness, anger, feeling so to happy, and you level up. And, that's going to require a lot of self-care. If you are in that depressed state, you probably better seek the advice, of a professional. But with my wife being a mental health therapist, we also get to hear a lot of those testimonials. And the turnaround that some of those people make is nothing short of miraculous, and it's truly inspiring. And if you can pull yourself out of that situation, you will inspire other people.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
will your family be better off without you? Hell no.
Never.
You just got to turn it around and inspire them.
Mhm.
And I said that, and it sounds really simple, but it's not.
I know.
That's not
Yeah.
lost on me.
Yeah. 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 I can tell you've got some experience there, knowing that, the worst thing probably you can do is just tell somebody to buck it up and it's all in their head and just work harder and everything will work out. There's a positive mental attitude. There's a place for that. Working harder, absolutely, there's a place for that. But when it comes to especially the chemical imbalance, hormonal imbalance that leads to depression and suicide, and don't play with that. You're kind of playing with fire. Just like you said, get the help that you need and um, reach out. There's a lot of resources available, even within the agriculture community. Hotlines and things like that that are available if you're in that state. So I say that because when we went through, the Great Depression, there are stories of people who came out of the Great Depression extremely wealthy. There are also stories of people who committed suicide and ended it because their net worth went down dramatically overnight, and their net worth was connected to their self worth, and they thought, "Man, I'm worth less. I'm worth less on paper, therefore I'm worthless." Now, that's not true, right? Like if you were just tell us, I guess, from an objective point of view, what is net worth anyway?
Net worth.
Yeah, net worth, as far as your financial net worth. I mean, your net worth your net
Oh,
worth changes every day, right? But when the market goes down, I think you get excited because that's where your net worth,
yeah.
and a banker might say, "Hey, look at your balance sheet," and you're like, "Hey, look at this cash flow I'm creating."
Yep. I've had that conversation with my banker and my CPA in that crash of 2015. And I was excited during that crash. I generated cash flow and I expanded my numbers. How could that not be a good thing?
Yeah.
You know, and if I'm making margins and I can expand my numbers, that only means I'm going to make more money and generate more cash flow going into the future. It's the decisions that we make today that create the opportunities for tomorrow. And when I co-taught that school with that other guy, we had a serious argument before that school started over this very topic. I started my operation with $7,000, built a seven-figure deal out of it. Cash flow was the key. He was concerned about net worth, and I'm like, man, I'm in my, I started buying cattle when I was in my early 20s. You know how many market crashes I've been through, BSE and the housing bubble burst at 2008. And, we had that year some idiots flew a plane into a building and then there's the
Hmm.
crash of 50. I've been through so many of these crashes and I've seen my net worth drop on paper.
Hmm.
But everything I had physically, the tangible assets were still there and I could still utilize them and generate cash flow. So my idea as a young person was I'm going through these cycles. I'm going to go through more cycles. So I'm not concerned with the balance sheet. I'm concerned about growing this operation moving forward. And then if I ever do decide to retire, my inventory valuation on that day is what's going to matter,
Yeah.
you know, when I sell out. But man, I'm 47 and I don't plan on retiring. I mean,
Yeah.
I, I'm going to have to be physically not able to do anything before I retire because I love this job too much,
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
and
Thank you for touching on that. That's exactly what I hoped to express is that we've been in an inflationary period, right? And like just like you said, will there be deflation? Will we see land values drop? Who knows, right? But if they do, or livestock values drop, there is opportunity in that. Don't get hung up on those ratios. Drive for cash flow. Is that what you're
I'm a
saying?
big cash flow guy. Yeah, because you know when you have positive cash flow, you can stay current on all your bills. You can expand an operation. I mean, even if it's just a little bit, we don't have to go for these big expansions of 20%. Even if it's five, you're still growing,
Hmm.
and if you're growing even 5%, you are wealth building.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, okay, well, some this has been a good conversation. I want to ask another couple marketing questions and then wrap up with the mindset piece and dive a
Okay.
little bit deeper into that. Is there ever a time where where you will recommend sitting out of the market? That could be because of drought, or maybe you see somebody suggested the other day sheep are undervalued. Let's change species. If that's in your wheelhouse and you know how to manage a sheep herd, would there be a time when you would do that? And uh, maybe let's address those in two parts. First of all, drought, you have to sell. There could be some tax consequences, but it's in your best interest ecologically to completely destock, and you need to not have cattle on your ranch. How would you address that one?
Um, there are different parts of the country and the climate's different. Where I live, I have never seen a drought so bad that we absolutely had to destock. And there is a segment in my marketing school where I do teach a drought strategy. And, you know, don't get too hung up on the numbers that I'm about to throw out there. They are for illustration.
Yep.
But if you see a drought coming on, and there was a guy that went through my school in Kansas, did this a couple years ago. We had that drought of 23. He recognized the drought coming on to cull cows to match his available resources. He had to cull a certain percentage of the cows. And one of the things I teach in my schools is, breeding stock to stocker trade. So let's say we've got this, 1,200 plus pound cow, and we buy back a 4 weight stalker. That 4 weight stalker will eat 1/3 as much as that 12 weight cow. So what that does then is it stretches that feed budget.
Mhm.
And so what he did was he culled deeper into his herd. He sold more of these cows and did the head per head deal and bought stalkers. And so he still had the same number of cattle. He just swapped classes. The neat thing about that was the value of gain steps in. The market also went up. He sold those stalkers at the end of the summer, and stalkers were overvalued to cows at the end of the summer because of the lingering effects of the drought. And then he was able to sell the stalkers, buy back cows again. So there are some of those trades that we can do to help alleviate the burden of a drought. And that's going to be very key on going to a smaller animal to stretch that available feed budget, because I know you're really solid into the regenerative agriculture, the ecology. We do not want to overstress this ranch. I,
Mhm.
I can show you pastures here that are still feeling the effects of the drought from 2012 just
Mhm.
because of the management. And 2013 was a flood year here.
Mhm.
But because of what they did in 2012, they are still in that drought. They're still feeling the effects of it. And then the interspecies deal, that could be another one to go from, cows to nannies or something like that. You're going to a smaller animal. It's been a while since I've looked at a sheep or goat market report. I don't raise either one. I don't have the fences to hold them in. But those, with the rise in the cattle market, the last time I looked at a sheep or goat market report was several months ago. That was a monster trade. Cattle were extremely overvalued, the sheep and goat several months ago.
Okay. Okay.
But if I don't know if the sheep and goat market has been sympathetic and gone up like the cattle market has or not. But
Yeah. So the opportunity absolutely is there. I mean, if it's in your wheelhouse, you're able to run the difference, a multi-species operation, then what I'm hearing you say is it's something that can work.
it can work. And I feel like the other thing we have to mention here, Jared, is when you go from cattle, and that is all you have ever known, you will
Yep.
learn an animal health aspect going to sheep and goats.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. There's going to be a learning curve there, and so mitigating that is important. Perhaps partnering with somebody who already has that in place. But what about just sitting out the market altogether, or sitting out the drought? Just saying, we're going to destock. Our dollar bills aren't going to eat much, so we're going to put them in the bank. Um, we can't really speak perhaps to the tax consequences of that. That might be a state by state or whatever. But let's
Yep.
just say from the marketing aspect, Doug, would that be a good decision? And how do you know when to jump back in when you have the grass available, right? How do you hold your position in cash versus cattle?
Here's my thought on it. And I really don't like this idea of liquidating and sitting on cash. In fact, I wrote about this in my Friday market intel blog this morning.
Okay.
Um, One of the reasons is, our cash inflates so much. And so when that money's sitting in the bank, it's losing value. And really, when you're not using the capital, it's absolutely worthless. It's just paper with ink on it.
Mhm.
Money is a fungible proxy used as a medium of exchange to trade with others in a civilized manner. And the other thing is, since this market keeps going up right now, you're going to lose all your buyback power. So on a head per head basis, if you liquidate 1,000 head today and you sit it out, you might only be able to buy back 700 in the future. That's the same thing as an inventory valuation loss. We're in a margin business trying to make profit per head, and now you have less head generating profit. The other problem I have with it, if you sell out to the bare walls, you still have overheads,
Yep.
but now you have no cash flow. So you're going to burn some of that cash while it's sitting in the bank, just for your overheads.
Yep.
So my suggestion would be is to try to find a place to ship those cattle to. And it's a lot easier on the stalker side, and that's not lost on me because you can just take your stalkers and ship them to a feed yard, and finish them out. The cow deal would be a little bit more tricky. You're gonna have to find somebody you can trust, somebody that isn't going to run all the condition off the cattle, that knows how to handle animals, that's going to take care of them, look after them the way they're supposed to. So you're probably going to have to be a bit of a micromanager, but you're starting to see some of that my control issues come out here as well. But yeah, you definitely would want to be checking up on them. But
Sure.
I don't like the idea of just liquidating the cattle and setting it out because there's just too many other factors that can come back and bite you.
Okay.
And, to kind of tie that in very quickly with the drought, when we call off because of drought, everybody else is calling at the same time for the same reason. That depresses the market. When it does rain again, we're all trying to restock at the same time. That drives the market up. So you have that working against you on both ends.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, there's that's really good. There's a principle that you can't feed your way out of a drought. I think in principle I agree with that. But if you understand your cost of gain, is there ever a scenario where you keep the cattle on the ranch, you feed them to get to a strategic point where you can market? Say let's say you're 5 months from weaning, you know what the market is today. Maybe you even forward contract those calves, and so you're saying, okay, we're gonna import feed, and we're gonna feed our way to this point. You're not feeding your way out of the drought. You're feeding your way to where you can get those cattle marketed.
Mhm. So I'm gonna touch on two things here. That's kind of a resource management
Mm-hmm.
decision there. When we went through the drought here a couple years ago, there were some guys that did exactly what you said. They tried to feed their way through the drought. The first thing they burned up was their cash. Then they burned up the hay they bought. Then they had to liquidate the cows, and they're in a very bad situation right now. The forward contract thing, I have no. It's a great method. In fact, when we had that drought, there were some cattle I think were sold on some video auctions, or they were forward contracted, and the ranches would contact the feed yard that bought those cattle, and like, hey, you're aware of the situation we're in. We need to get rid of these calves a little sooner because we just can't hang on to them. The feed yards were very accommodating. Of course, they had to adjust the price a
Sure.
little bit, but the customer on the other end was willing to take them sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping that line of communication open. Sometimes they're very willing. Some of the feed yards said, no, we're full, but we'll let you out of the contract. If you can sell them to somebody else and, get out of that situation, no hard feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. And then the last one on marketing is comparing it to other industries right now. How does sell by marketing compare to just dumping your money in the stock market, or buying some rental properties, or doing some off farm investing?
You know, I'm going to deflect the stock market deal. I don't invest there. The whole algorithm thing is what bothers me. But I love real estate. In fact, my wife and I have been looking at properties, now for months, and there are some there are some deals you can do with real estate that are exactly like sell by marketing. One of the concepts that's out there is called BRRRR, and it stands for buy, rehab, or yeah, buy, rehab, your renovation, rent, refinance, and then repeat. And so I'm going to go right to the repeat part. So you buy this property, they kind of want you to buy it with cash. You rehab it, get it rented, and then you have that after renovation valuation. ARV is what they call it. That is no different than buying a feeder bull and castrating. You have forced equity there.
Mhm.
When you rent it, now you've got the cash flow on that property with the ARV. So what you do then is you refinance it. So now it's, what do they call it? Like a reverse mortgage. So I can pull my equity out of that property, go buy another one,
Mhm.
and then your tenant's making that payment for you. That's sell by marketing on rental houses.
Okay. Sure.
And so I kind of like that a little better. I'm a little old school. You got to remember, I was taught sell by marketing, from Ann Barnhart,
Mhm.
and she was real big into tangible assets. That rubbed off on me. So I'm real big
Mhm.
on tangible assets. That's one of the reasons I don't like stocks. But your retail businesses, Walmart, they do sell by marketing. They call it something different. They call it vendor management inventory. But all these other industries have some form of sell by marketing in them.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I guess it comes down to, as I see it, you enjoy real estate. You're probably going to take the time to do your due diligence. It's not drudgery to you. You understand the principles. Um, so if there is another business that you look at that, hey, this could complement what we're doing, and then it could be a good fit. If it's a distraction in that, hey, I don't even enjoy it. I don't want to look at the statements. I don't want to go. I don't want to go house shopping or whatever. I hate dealing with tenants. Then that's probably not your jam. Stick to.
There's there's some of it that's a pain, but you know, knowing the sell by marketing on the cattle as well as I do, that's where this real estate thing just seemed like a fit because it is the exact same principle. Um, but then I have to deal with people.
Mm-hmm.
I much prefer to deal with cattle because cattle are honest. People will lie.
Sure.
That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But it, but I think it kind of comes back to your point. It's like you remember in my school. I hate the word diversified because the way we're taught diversification is I was taught you got to have cattle and crops because when your cattle make money, your crops don't, and vice versa. To me, that was a planned failure.
Right.
So I like multiple sources of income. I want the cattle making money. I want the crops making money. I want the rental properties making money. And there's just something about making money, Jared. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's just fun.
Yeah. It is. It is. Well, let's wrap up with a little bit of mindset here. This has been good. Hopefully, this is helpful to the listeners. Of saying here's where we're at in the market. Um, but when Bud Williams taught his livestock marketing school, the very first principle, as I remember it, was know yourself and know what you will do, know what you won't do, um, and be objective about yourself. Like know where your weaknesses are, but also um, don't be prideful in downplaying your strengths either, which seems crazy, right? You're going to pridefully downplay your strengths. You're going to say I'm not better than that next guy when actually you've got some strengths that where you can shine if you will step into those. So that's what I see as knowing yourself, but what can you add to that as far as that first principle and how does that tie into the mindset of being a good marketer?
That's a good question. And I'll put it to you this way. I've had people come to my school because they've been to a school somewhere else and they walk away with this idea that they need to get out of cows and calves and get into stockers. And so they come to my school to learn how to market stockers, but they really love cows and calves. And they didn't enjoy the stalker deal one bit. You know, if cows and calves is what you love, you got to figure out how to make cows and calves work. And sometimes that means marketing the bred cows or marketing some pairs, which that goes against the paradigm. We don't sell cows. You keep the young one and run her till she's old type paradigm. So we've got to break some of those paradigms. But if that's what you like doing, we just got to figure out a way to do it better. And, marketing can help with that. Um, there are guys that could make more money running heifers than steers, but they don't want to deal with heifer issues, because your neighbor's bull's going to jump the fence. And so they run steers. Hey, they were honest. They could make more money with heifers, but they prefer to run steers. And, so they do realize they're leaving some profit margin on the table, but that's the decision they made. But you have to know, just like you said, what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. The thing is, if you're willing to do something, you will get good at
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And if you despise it, I mean, why set yourself up? If one, you don't like sheep or goats, maybe they got the best margin in the world, but you just hate them. You think they're from the devil. Why set yourself up for failure by doing that? And the other thing we suggest, if it is an enterprise that you see fits your resource base, you don't have to be the one that does it either. This might push against your control freak attitude here, Doug. You
it.
don't have to be the one. You can outsource
I'm
management, but
I'm learning. I'm learning, Jared. I've started outsourcing some things, and
there
the
you
people I
go.
outsource them to are better than I am.
And that's how it's supposed to work, right? That's their genius. That's what is hard for us is easy for somebody else. I mean, Ag Steward would not have gone beyond our initial summit, which I think you listened in on that first one in January of 20. When was it?
Been a few
25.
years.
Yeah, I think that's where we first met. I'd heard of you, but I remember we chatted in the comments in there, and then I'm like, okay, this is a guy that I can refer people to about sell by marketing. It wouldn't have gone beyond there if I didn't learn to outsource and build a team, of people who are good at what I was not good at. I don't want to be an internet marketer. I don't want to be build landing
Yep.
pages and funnels and run Facebook ads and all that stuff. So, um, okay, so mindset. We know that fear and greed play into the market. Um, how do we get what? Well, let me just ask it this way: what place does emotion play in marketing?
This is an interesting question, and you heard this years ago. It's something that's been passed down through marketing schools for years. Is sell by takes the emotion out of marketing. We're human beings. You do not leave emotion on the sideline. You take the price of some of these 5 weight steers. That load cost over $220,000. You think we're not emotionally tied to that $220,000? Yeah, we're going to be emotional about that. What the sell by marketing does is it helps control the emotion, because all of our control is on the buy. So if these cattle start getting too high, you have to have the self-discipline to stop bidding. I don't care that they're fancy and black and weaned. They are too high. You stop bidding. And you wait for something else come through that sale ring and buy it instead. Um, but we're a sports family. My daughter plays a ton of basketball, and I have seen the right kind of emotions evolve during a game, and it is those emotions is why my daughter's team won. We have also seen it go the opposite direction, where if the wrong emotions start to take over, we suffer a terrible, embarrassing loss.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to have the right emotions tied to the right things. You have to have that self-discipline, and things do have a way of working out, but you have to be patient. I I couldn't tell you how many times, Jared, I've gone to a sale and just absolutely got skunked. I mean, I couldn't buy anything at that sale that day. And yeah, I leave a little upset. It was a complete waste of my time being there. But going home with an empty trailer was the best thing I could have done. And then you go to another sale the next day and, you get them bought.
Yeah. So it's not that we need to remove the emotion. Like that's amen. Because what is life without emotion, right? I think that's one of the challenges of the current society is that whether it's scrolling on our devices, whether it's food or alcohol or drugs or whatever, gambling, all of those things are just going to numb us to some level. And we're made to feel emotion. We're made to feel that range of emotion. So thanks for going there. Thanks for explaining that. It's not
So
that it removes the emotion, it's you manage it, you control it.
no, and I want to mention this real quick since you brought that up. When you held your phone up and you were talking about scrolling, that is a cheap dopamine hit.
Oh
That's
yeah.
what gets people so addicted to that phone. Attach the dopamine to the right things.
Amen. Right. Yeah. The way God created us, right? I mean that connection, the dopamine, the oxytocin, all those chemicals that bond us together. Don't be bonded to this thing. Be bonded to, even the fruits of your labor. I think that that's a godly pursuit to like look back at the end of the day and say, hey, I built this fence, or, hey, I marketed these cattle, or we got these cattle settled and we did a great job grazing this field. We can look back on that and think, that should create the dopamine. And then we want more of that. That's real.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's real. Very cool. Well, anything else that you feel like you would want to share on this podcast here? It's May 16th, 2025.
No, that was the only thing I was going to mention was the date, since we were talking about the markets that we probably ought to establish the date and time. I'm trying to think. I've been buying cattle for 26 years.
Mm-hmm.
And man, it's been interesting. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to work in the feed mill in town, and these old guys would come in and, oh yeah, I remember 1950, whatever this, and in 1970, and I'm like, whatever, you don't remember those years that well. Well, now that I've got a couple decades behind me, it's like, yeah, you do remember those years that well, and I really think 2025 is going to be one of those years we remember.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. For sure. Well, good. Tell us how to register for your upcoming schools or where to go. I just saw an email yesterday, or I opened it yesterday with list of the schools through the end of the year.
Yeah, so we've got a school coming up in Jackson, Tennessee at the end of July. That's July 30th and 31st. And then we have two schools in Beatrice, Nebraska. One is the first week of November, the other one is the first week of December. And registrations for those schools are coming in, even for the November, December one. Jackson, Tennessee, uh, because nobody does schools east of the Mississippi or in the southern states. We are doing expanded seating on that one, and it is already 30% full.
Cool. That is so cool.
And so you can find the information for that on mrcattlemaster.com.
Okay. All right. We'll check that out. Yeah, mrcattlemaster.com. We'll put the link in the show notes here so you can go, and then to register, they have to print it out, send you a check, or is there an online registration?
So
How do they get their name
we're
on that school?
we're working on that right now. You still have to print the registration form off, mail it in with the tuition check, but that was one of the things outsourced. I got a website guy working on the website right now, so hopefully we can get online registration up soon.
Okay. Yeah. Remember,
So we're working on it.
it is
I'm trying to get
2025
caught
here,
up with
Doug.
it.
I mean,
What's that?
I said it is 2025. The internet's only
You
been out
know,
here for 30 years.
we
So we're,
we built, my wife and I built that web album between basketball games. And yeah, we're trying to get caught up, Jared.
that is all right. I think that's awesome, actually, because I mean, you said you've taught over 1,200 people, and you've done it with a website that doesn't accept a payment. You don't have a payment portal on. I mean,
No,
that
it's
says
it's
something for the caliber of the education is like people are willing to mail a check to get on the list and show up to the class. So,
I appreciate that.
yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, Doug. Well, thanks. This has been a great conversation. Thanks everybody for listening, and certainly check out Doug's schools. And hope you enjoyed this. Make the best decisions you can with the information you have. Um, and you know what? Mistakes are just part of it. Like we learn the most from the mistakes, and so don't beat yourself up that like, hey, I messed up on that marketing decision, and be like, you know what? Maybe it did cost me a few thousand or 20,000, whatever, but man, that's tuition. That's tuition. Now I know
Tuition.
that lesson, and I won't do that again. So, all right, thanks, Doug.